Hello, welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast, hosted by me, Jack Perks. Professionally, I'm a wildlife cameraman, but I dabble in podcasting, and each Tuesday we release an episode as I have a chat with scientists, artists, filmmakers, and passionate people all about nature in a light-hearted and certainly not serious way. Hello and welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast. I hope you're all doing well. Well, my guest today is Hannah Rudd. She's a marine biologist and writer based in Suffolk. She's worked all over the world, particularly with sharks. She's also the policy and advocacy manager for the Anglin Trust, and she's a co-founder of their initiative Shark Hub UK. We're also going to be talking about her first book, Britain's Living Seas, which is a collaboration with the Wildlife Trusts and Bloomsbury Publishing, which is out now. Also, a bit of a side note, I am actually writing a book with Bloomsbury myself, so I haven't written a book for a number of years. I can't really say much more than that. I'll reveal more of that later down the line, so I'm quite excited to dust off the pen and try and scribble off some words again. Before we get into today's podcast, let's go to buymeacoffee.com. Buymeacoffee.com is a way for you to support the podcast. Seeing as we don't have any sponsors, this is the only way that I can make money from the podcast, and that money then goes back into buying equipment, travelling to go meet guests, etc, etc. So anything that you can donate is greatly appreciated. Now, we set ourselves a target of £500 to get some new microphones, and I can confirm we have now reached that, so I'm absolutely ecstatic with that. What we normally do is when you donate, you can leave a comment and we read the comments out. So I'm just going to read out the names of a few people that have donated. Robert Fletcher bought 3 coffees. He put well done. Cheers, Robert. We got John who bought a couple of coffees. He's put more good stuff and again. And then Kevin Chamberlain also bought a coffee. So thanks for those guys for just pushing it over the edge and getting to the £500 target. We're now looking to get £1,000, which I know you're thinking, bloody hell, Jack, how much money do you want? What that is for... I'm really enjoying meeting guests. I think that you get such a different quality when you're in person with the guest. Obviously, these people live all over the country. So for enable me to do that, I need to get some money for that. So we're now looking to raise £1,000 from now. We've got 1% of it so far. And then that money is going to go towards meeting guests, because I think Zoom's great and sometimes Zoom is practical. But actually being there works so well. I will also do a quick note. Many of you might know that I do talks, and I was at a talk the other night and someone came up to me and said, I couldn't work buymeacoffee.com, but here's some money towards your microphone. And I wondered, did anyone else have that issue? Are you wanting to donate money, but you can't navigate buymeacoffee.com? If that is the case, let me know, and I might very well find a different solution. But this was from Kath from Derbyshire, and she put, thanks, Jack, for keeping me sane during lockdown. Keep up the good work with the podcast. And that was in the old-fashioned greetings card. So thanks for that, Kath. That was lovely to meet you. So yeah, if you are having trouble with it, let me know. But yeah, we're trying to raise money for that, so that we can do podcasts much like today's episode, which was meeting Hannah Rudd, which is a great name for someone who works with fish, because we got to meet in person in Peterborough and talk about her work. So let's get on with our chat with Hannah.
Well, good morning. I suppose it might not be morning when you're listening to this, but it's morning where I am. And that is Ferry Meadows in Peterborough. And it is incredibly frosty. There is the most spectacular hoarfrost here today. It is absolutely everywhere. It's something you'd maybe expect more in the Scottish Highlands than in Peterborough. And I'm here today, try not to fall over a slippy slope, because I'm meeting up with Hannah Rudd, who's a marine scientist, and Ferry Meadows in Peterborough is roughly about in the middle from where both of us live. I am somewhat regretting coming here today. It might be a little bit warmer if we'd done this via Zoom. However, the views are spectacular. It's a most amazing wintry frost. It's January at the minute, and I'm just looking out over the lake. There's seams of cormorants in these wintry trees. There are black-headed gulls sitting on the ice, and I did just hear a water rail, though it's obviously stopped singing now that I'm recording. So Hannah's running a little bit late, which is absolutely fine. There's worse places to be in the world, but when Hannah gets here, we will get started and have a good old waffle about marine life. So welcome to the podcast, Hannah.
Thank you. Hi, Jack. Thanks for having me.
We are sat on a bench in Peterborough
Yes.
because that's roughly in between where both of us live. And it's quite a frosty, although actually a lot of the frost is melting now. The bench that we're on is a soggy bench, and it's all melting a little bit, but it's still a very pretty morning, I would say. Nice and easy out of the ballpark. Frets to our oceans, or ocean, as I should say, as we were talking just before the podcast. Frets to kind of UK seas. What are we looking at?
Well, I think there's a mixture of threats. I think when you're dealing with an environment as dynamic as the ocean, you can't view things in isolation because everything feeds back off of each other. But the big three are pollution, so that's things like plastics, chemical pollution, sewage pollution, overfishing. It's an elephant in the room. It makes people feel very uncomfortable, but commercial overfishing is a huge threat to our seas. And climate change increasingly as well. It's a big issue, but kind of another issue that will start emerging is things like invasive species as well.
Yeah, I suppose people don't talk about that as much as climate change and other problems like that. I forget the exact figure, but it's billions that we spend, isn't it, to try and eradicate invasive species?
Yeah, more so in rivers at the moment in particular, in terms of aquatic environment, but increasingly in the ocean as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of invasive. I forget. Is it Sargassum weed, or there's some sort of weed that we get, marine seaweed? There's going to be a few invasives, I guess, turning up, isn't there, which cause issues?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we talk looking globally in terms of invasive species, lionfish is one of the most commonly known ones in the Caribbean, and they have kind of spearfishing tournaments now to see who can eradicate the most in a season. Believe it or not, there was actually a lionfish caught off of Chesil Beach in 2021 by a sea angler. We don't know whether that was an aquarium release or whether it actually did just turn up here.
Legitimately caught it on hook, so it wasn't. And we don't think he was hoaxing or anything. Like it got
No, it was sent to CFAS, I think. I don't know where it ended up and what happened, but I mean, sea anglers are going to be one of the first people that catch all these sort of weird and wonderful things, right? That turn up. So. Yeah, it's interesting times out there.
Well, with warming seas, I suppose as well, you're going to start seeing more Mediterranean species turning up, aren't you? Like, 20, 30 years ago, like gilthead bream or triggerfish and stuff like that would have been a rare occurrence, whereas now they're pretty much established, aren't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you look at the sort of return of apex predators to our waters, I suppose you could call it, the bluefin tuna. We're seeing more and more blue sharks, thresher sharks, poor beagles. And we see science is kind of suggesting at the moment that something happened in 2015 in terms of oceanic currents or warming. We're not quite sure what at the moment, but all of our data that we collect at the Pat Smith database at the moment seems to suggest that there was a turning point in 2015.
Is that right? Okay, so it wasn't necessarily gradual then. It was literally something just tipped.
Yes. I mean,
that's what the data suggests.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. I always hate to say yes or no at the moment because we're hypothesizing, but we seem to think that something happened then.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't realise that. And I suppose you can call it the Blue Planet 2 effect, but plastics are obviously on everyone's minds, but I noticed you didn't mention those. So do you think plastics, are they kind of an overproportional problem? Or obviously they are a problem, but...
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of pollution, plastics is obviously a huge issue.
Yeah.
And, no, as you say, I think the Blue Planet 2 effect has done kind of a remarkable tipping point in terms of individual and community action for conservation in general, when you look at how many businesses have followed that trend in reducing their plastic use. But, it's difficult because... we get projects like the Ocean Cleanup, for example, and a lot of scientists are very sceptical about that project and whether it's actually doing what it's saying. So, for example, a lot of the plastics that are supposedly removed from the sea have no biofilms on them. They have no microorganisms or species that would have taken hold of that plastic. It kind of sheds a lot of skepticism, and I think the most important thing that we can do is actually just reduce our consumption and production of plastic. Unfortunately, a lot of the plastic that's in the ocean is going to remain there, and it's our job now to just reduce the amount that we produce and our dependency on it.
Because I suppose there must be alternatives to it. It's just, is it more expensive or just not widely used at the moment?
I think Yeah, I mean, I'm not a plastics expert.
No,
but
okay, fair. I'm putting you on the spot now, Hannah. Yeah.
But from what I understand, there's a lot of things we can do to reduce our consumption.
Okay.
So we can make sure that we're not buying single-use forks and knives and
Weren't they
straws
banned recently?
They were banned
Yeah.
recently. Yeah, I don't think it's going to come in for another year or
Okay,
so.
okay.
As all these things, they take
Yeah,
ages. But yes, there's lots of things we can do.
So what should or shouldn't we be eating then? Because obviously this is a hot topic, and I remember when Seaspiracy came out on Netflix, obviously everyone was talking about it, and you mentioned overfishing as well. I just wonder what your thoughts were on the whole, should we eat fish or should we not?
Yeah, I think this is a really hot topic, and I think it's a really difficult thing to communicate well.
Yeah.
And it's something that's very divisive, particularly when so many livelihoods depend on it.
Yeah.
And I don't think eating fish is a bad thing in
No.
itself, and I don't think fishing is a bad thing in itself. There are just certain gear types or ways of fishing that are particularly more harmful to the environment than others. So, for example, bottom dredging
Yeah.
is quite harmful, whereas hand line caught fish is much more sustainable. And it's the same in terms of species. There's a group called ICES every year, and they produce scientific advice in terms of what we should and shouldn't be fishing and how much tonnage that should be. And more often than not, governments of the world exceed those tonnages by quite a remarkable margin. And
Yeah.
I think one of the simplest things that we can do is make sure that we follow the science and that those landings are within that limit. But in terms of what the average consumer can do, there's plenty of resources out there. So things like the Marine Conservation Society Good Fish Guide is a really good one to look at. But equally, things like the Marine Stewardship Council Eco-Label is also really good. I know that one's there's a lot of divisiveness about whether it's actually as sustainable as people are saying it is.
Okay.
But I personally think that as a consumer, when you've got all of these other things to worry about, something is better than nothing.
Yeah,
And making
yeah,
a
I
start
get
is
that.
better than not doing anything at all.
I
And
get that.
it's also important, I think, just to mention as well that there's been loads of scientific research and assessments that show that blue foods, so those from the sea, whether that's wild fisheries or aquaculture, can actually be some of the most sustainable and carbon friendly foods on the planet. So
Yeah.
I don't think getting rid of seafood out of our diet is actually an option. It's a
Yeah.
really powerful way of providing protein and essential nutrients. Particularly, I think 3 billion people depend on seafood
Yeah,
around the
yeah.
world. So I completely understand people who wouldn't want to eat fish, and that's there's also the sentience argument and the welfare argument,
Yeah.
and that's a different side of the coin. But in terms of food production, I think there are ways that we can make it more sustainable.
I suppose in comparison as well, like what you've mentioned, like to dairy and other land-based stuff, it's nowhere near as bad, is it?
Yeah, I think.
Or different problems, I guess.
Different
It's difficult.
problems.
That's a very generalist statement.
I
But
think the problem with the ocean is that it's so out of sight, out of mind for so many
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
firmly believe that if some of the fishing practices that took place at sea happened on land, there would be public outcry about them.
Yeah.
So if you had a tractor with a long net behind it and it was going through a field just to collect wheat, and in it took every fox, badger, bird, insect, whatever with it, I don't think we would stand up for that. So why do we think it's okay within the ocean? Well, what is a suitable level of bycatch, for want of a better phrase? Scientists know that there is not, we're not going to have no bycatch in all fisheries. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. But at what point do we say, to fishers, you have to implement this bycatch mitigation? I know it's expensive, but we don't think it's acceptable that 100,000 seabirds are killed in longline fisheries every year, whatever it might be. So it's just a really delicate balance, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no easy answer, and you're always train pipping as we go. There's always something
The
cocks up on.
train's agreeing.
Yeah, yeah, that guy is fully on board. I mean, it's similar with salmon. We're actually doing a salmon farming episode soon, but I feel like if that same thing was with chickens, which I mean, some people would argue it's not far off, but with the flesh coming off them and riddled with disease, people wouldn't stand for it. And yet, because it's just a fish in a net, people aren't bothered.
I completely agree, and I touch on salmon farms a little bit in my book, because I think, as you say, there is a movement of people starting to realise what's going on in salmon farms. But we certainly need to make more of a noise about it, and I think this all goes back to The stuff about fish not having really expressions, and we're
Yeah.
just kind of looking at fish as though, I don't know, we just don't categorise them in the same way as we do with mammals and birds, for example.
Yeah.
And I think if we did feel that empathy towards them, we might be more against these things like salmon farms. Again, not to say you can't eat farm salmon, but there are, again, harmful practices alongside it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because whenever I'm trying to push fish on the telly or things like that, it's always like ice skating uphill, because it's not furry and feathery and cute and cuddly. And it's the same principle in that people just don't emotionally connect with a fish. Or most people don't. I suppose me and you might be slightly different, but see, trains agreeing again. But yeah, a lot of people would struggle to do that. So it is trickier to do that. I'm going to ask you something I always get asked, which is, do you eat fish?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I eat fish. I eat seafood.
Okay.
I grew up eating seafood.
Yeah.
I grew up eating the fish that my dad caught, actually.
Oh, okay.
So he was a sea angler. And one of the most sustainable ways to eat fish, really.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll come on to some of that in a bit, because I know obviously you do work at the Angling Trust as well. But yeah, I people always shocked when I say I eat fish. Like, how could you eat fish? Like, well, I quite like eating fish. So.
Yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
No.
viewpoints.
No. I'm selective in what I eat. I don't eat cod and I don't eat salmon, but I'll still eat things that I might occasionally catch, or if it's been line caught or whatever, and just kind of check it out.
Yeah,
but
I do, and my boyfriend finds it very annoying that I always pull up the Good Fish Guide whenever we're in a restaurant, and I'll always ask the waitress, do you know where this fish has come
Yeah.
from, and that type of thing. And I just think you have to kind of build
No, I
that.
think so. It's responsible to do it. So
Yeah.
no, I'm with you there. I think that's a good thing, and that kind of neatly comes on to the next thing, which is what can we do as individuals then if we want to try and help marine life around British coastlines. What can people do? Because sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. Like, you're seeing all these problems, and you think, well, what can one person do to kind of help these issues?
Yeah, I completely agree. Particularly right now, when we're having so many things thrown at us through the cost of living crisis, and just really trying to survive in these really harsh circumstances. Particularly, a lot of the kind of sustainable options are a bit more expensive. So people can, start to think that that's maybe not part of their lifestyle, or maybe it's not accessible to them. And I firmly believe that if everyone can just do what they can within their own circumstances, so whether that's picking more sustainable seafood or not eating seafood at all because they can't make those sustainable choices, or whether it's reducing their plastic consumption, whether it's walking to work if they can, or taking a bike to the gym instead of driving that distance, or taking public transport when there's not train strikes.
Yeah.
And just consuming less as well. I think that's one of the big things is we live in such a consumerist society. Look at fast fashion, for example, where there's this constant need for the latest trends.
Yeah.
Actually, the best clothes you have are the ones in your wardrobe. And I certainly think we can make a huge impact in reducing our footprint if we just consumed less of the stuff that we depend on. So, and that's a cheap way of living as well if you're spending less and stuff.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I think that's a good way forward. But also, when you're out enjoying the coastline, be a responsible person. If you see some litter, take 5 minutes to pick a few bits up. Don't disturb marine life. I think that's a really big one, particularly over COVID. We've seen more and more people flock to the coastline, and that's absolutely amazing. But there's also a lot of cases of animal disturbance. So whether that's seals that are resting on a beach, or dolphins that might be playing in a harbour, for example. Just treat everything with respect, and you'll get a lot more out of it.
I think that's all sensible and good advice. When you're not writing books on marine life, you also work at the Angling Trust, don't you?
I do, yes.
So what do you do there?
So I'm the Angling Trust Policy and Advocacy Manager. I predominantly lead on recreational sea angling related policy, so that's where my marine science background comes in. And day to day that can range from working on sort of high level policy around fisheries management plans, but then it can also be things like talking to stakeholders, so talking to sea anglers on a daily basis about their local patch. How can we do things about improving fish welfare? How can we get them involved in our Anglers Against Pollution campaign, or Anglers Against Litter, for example. And increasingly we're working with sea anglers to collect data, so that's where Shark Hub, for example, comes in.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, so Shark Hub is a collaborative partnership between recreational sea angling bodies. So we've got the Shark Fishing Club of the British Isles, Shark Angling Club of Great Britain. I need to get that right.
Get it right, or we'll get angry letters.
Yeah, and the Sport Fishing Club of the British Isles is also in there. and the Pat Smith database, which is part of this and was started at the Shark Club. And then we also have several academic institutions, so University of York, Plymouth Marine Laboratory, and Bournemouth University at the moment. And we're always looking to add partners as well. And then of course the Angling Trust, who's the organisation I'm at. And we really came to this kind of idea of pulling these parties together and treating each other as equals, because more often than not in science, and it's not just an issue confined to the angling community, you get this idea of parachute science, where scientists will come in, they'll do their little bits and bobs, and then they'll leave the community. They won't give them any recognition, and they won't provide any feedback on how, what the science showed them and how they can move forward. So this partnership is really trying to avoid that and work together as one to really further our understanding of sharks around the British Isles, empower the angling community to have a voice, and to also do things like improvement in fish welfare, for example, because I really think that anglers can be one of the most important conservation stewards. They're eyes and ears for our lakes, our rivers, our coasts, and we need to work with them more and see them not as enemies but as partners.
There's a definite divide, isn't there, I think, at times where it can sort of be us and them.
Yeah.
Like you say, I don't see why, you talk to most fishermen and they've generally got a healthy interest in the natural world. And they've got so much valuable data, so it's better to get them on side for sure. And like you say, particularly with British sharks, I mean, apart from a handful of people who swim with blue sharks, how often are you going to see a poor beagle or a fresh or a mako? It's really, we rely on angling encounters, don't we? For good or for worse, it's one of the ways that we can rely on data. So it's interesting to hear you talk about shark fishing as well, because you are, let's face it, obsessed with sharks. You're a big shark fan, aren't you? So it can be an emotive topic, can't it, shark fishing? And I just wondered, have practices changed in the UK, or were they, you see these old pictures of them hanging up on the dock, or like people bringing them on the boat and hauling them out. Like, what's the state of UK shark fishing now then? Is it more conservation led? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's fair to say that when I was a student at university, had you asked me would I be working with shark fishermen, I think I would have run in the opposite direction. And I think that also shows the importance of being open-minded and listening to communities and differences of kind of views on the world and different relationships with the sea. But certainly, when you go back to sort of the 1950s, you're completely right. It was catch and kill tournaments, and it was stringing up poor beagles, threshers, blues, whatever shark they could get their hands on. But I think we've certainly seen a shift here in the UK, and it's, particularly in the last decade, towards catch and release only fishing. There's increasingly an interest in not inboarding the shark unless it's absolutely paramount for its welfare.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm particularly passionate about, is leaving the shark in the water. They have cartilaginous skeletons. They will suffocate under their own weight because they have such a gargantuan mass.
Yeah.
That unless they're quite a smaller shark, it's best to leave it in the water.
Is there, I don't know if there's been any studies, is there sort of a weight limit? Is it like if it's over 100 pounds, leave it in, or has it not got that refined?
I don't think it's got that refined.
No,
I think
okay.
it's more in terms of your own intuition.
Okay.
So if you've got a taupe that's sort of £20 or something,
It'd probably be okay.
It's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking more about the big blues that are over £100,
Yeah.
and poor beagles that are £500 and that type of thing.
To be fair, I don't know if I'd want that on the boat with me anyway.
No, I know, but some people, they're adamant that it's going to come on,
Yeah.
and I think, trying to hold it up for a photo, you can get a great trophy shot in the water.
Yeah.
Where it belongs, and even things like changing from jade hooks to circle hooks, because the research has suggested that circle hooks are a lot better. That's another thing that's happening. But equally, there's been a lot of studies in the United States, for example, looking at these species that suggest that post-release mortality is actually really low. They have really good survivability, these species, if it's catch and release angling. So, there will be cases potentially that where they do pass away, but I think that when we're looking at the mortality rates within commercial fisheries, that they're worlds apart.
Yeah.
I really think that the recreational angling community here in the UK has more to give in terms of conservation than it does in terms of impact.
Yeah, I think that's good. I was going to ask you about mortality survival, so I'm glad you brought that up. So that's interesting to hear. And like you say, although there might be one or two that don't make it, the data that we're then collecting is invaluable, really, isn't it? I remember, it was only a couple of weeks ago, and you might have seen this, somebody tagged a poor beagle, I think it was in southern England, and it ended up in Norway. And they got that, that data, because every time it would come to the surface, it would ping. I mean, that's an astonishing amount of distance for an animal to travel, but we wouldn't have known that had that not been caught and tagged. So there's incredible data and growth rates and things like that you can get from it, which, without fishing for them, although it's 5 minutes out of its day, which isn't ideal, it goes back and we're getting all this information and data from it.
Yeah, and the thing I always, I've been lucky.
Our mate's back.
Oh, the train's back. I've been lucky to study sharks in other parts of the world, and the methodology is always angling.
Yeah.
Even if you're just a scientific team, you catch the sharks, you take your measurements, you tag them, you release them. That's the protocol. And I think actually working with a community that has more knowledge and expertise in doing that is actually better for the shark's welfare.
Yeah.
I'm not a shark angler. Me going out and trying to capture a blue shark, I don't know what I'm doing.
No.
So I think working with that community is a lot better. And as you say, the information we can get is invaluable, whether that's areas like their breeding grounds, pupping grounds. We've seen anglers say they're seeing mating scars on some of these species more and more, which is so exciting.
Yeah, of course.
What are they using our waters for? Where are they going when they leave? Is the southwest of England a global hotspot for shark, pupping that could have global significance? We can't forget that when many of these species leave our waters, they enter the high seas, an area where there are many pelagic trawlers and long lines looking to capture them. So the data that we can collect from them whilst they're here is really of huge international significance.
How many species of shark have we got in the UK?
We have, I believe, around 40.
Okay.
I think 23 are migratory and 11 are deep sea.
Oh, yeah, okay. Have you got a favourite?
It's like trying to choose my children.
Well, I think
if
if every parent is listening, they all have a favourite kid. They just don't want to admit it.
I think for ages it was great whites, because everyone loves a great
everyone
white.
loves a great white.
I think now it is the thresher shark.
Okay.
Have
you seen one?
I haven't seen one. No. I've seen one jump, but I guess I haven't seen it up close. It was really far away.
Okay. And that's still cool though.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Where was that? Where did you see that?
That was off of Penzance.
Penzance, okay.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty epic.
Yeah, they're amazing, and they're here in the UK. Yeah. I mean, people think of going to the Philippines to dive with thresher sharks, and we don't know much about the threshers. They're very elusive, and I think that's one of the reasons why I find them so interesting.
Yeah.
Because they're just so guarded with their secrets.
Yeah.
But the Solent is home to thresher sharks.
That's meant to be like the capital, isn't it, of the UK? I don't know, because not many get reported anyway. I don't know how many get caught a year, but it's not many, is it?
It's not many.
No.
I mean, there's an angling club in the Isle of Wight that is specialist in this, and they're really one of the front leaders in terms of welfare and kind of bettering shark angling practices, and even they only catch a few every year.
I always think it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy as well, though. Like, if you're not targeting them, you're unlikely to get them. So I suppose it's because not many people are looking for them. Mm-hmm. That's why we don't get as many as well. I'm not saying that the sea's full of freshers. I'm just saying that if not many people are trying, you're not going to get them.
No. It's so true, and that feeds into the idea that people think they're going to go into shark-infested waters, and it's like I've sat on boats for hours throwing bait into the water, and one doesn't turn up.
No, exactly.
The idea that our seas are brimming with sharks. When I did the media run last year, when there was that unfortunate incident with the blue shark.
Yes, of course.
So many people were saying, I can't go to Cornwall on my holiday now. There's going to be, these man-eating... No, guys.
It's like 3 miles out, wasn't it, or something?
I thought, I think,
or 20? No, it might
I thought it was more like 30
It might be 30 then, sorry, Mr. Zero. Okay.
I think it was, it was on a snorkelling excursion, so it would have been a way offshore.
Yeah.
And, it was funny, though, because the week later, a blue shark did come inshore.
I saw that, yes, I did see that. So almost like all the signs, don't worry, we're never going to see a blue shark. Oh, bugger, there's one.
Literally, so I went on national television the week before saying, you will never see one inshore. and I was like, guys, I'm trying to help you.
Yeah. Career in tatters after that. Oh. You mentioned great white. I mean, we have actually already done a podcast on this. If people want to go back, they can listen to it. But about the possibility of great whites in the UK. What's your thoughts?
So there is actually a research team called OSearch coming here this year, and they're highly controversial, and I'm not going to go into it.
Oh, okay.
They have really interesting practices in terms. They've got a shed load of money.
Okay.
They're sponsored by people like SeaWorld, and but they have some really interesting practices that I don't feel quite comfortable with. But anyway, they're coming here next year. Yeah, well, this year, 2023, to find great white sharks, and they seem to think they're going to find them around the Shetland Islands, in between the Celtic Deeps, or around Cornwall.
Okay.
Before venturing off to the Mediterranean, where I think actually they're going to have a lot better chance.
They definitely are in the Med, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, we've got a big enough seal population to sustain them.
Yeah.
I think the water temperature is about right, but I really believe that we have some of the busiest seas in the world, certainly in Europe, and that if there was one here, it would come up in a trawl by now. We would have seen it, a seal bite. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility in terms of the environment, but I'm just highly skeptical that they are actually here. And I think going to places like Sicily and Tunisia and Libya, where we know they're bycaught every so often, that's the better chance of where you actually find them.
Yeah, I think my thoughts were that if we do get them, they're a very occasional they're not, I don't think they're year round. I think it's probably a very occasional migrant if we get the odd one, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, there's no reason why one couldn't get lost across, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, or maybe I don't think one would come out through the Strait of Gibraltar, but as you say, every now and then maybe one comes, but I don't think.
Well, there was one caught off France, wasn't there? I think it was in the 70s, and it was something like 200. I might get my figures wrong here, so don't quote me on it. But it's something like 230 nautical miles, which for a great white, it's not a lot. It could do, so. I'm sounding like a conspiracy theorist now, but
no, I mean, I think it's only a matter of time before you see one.
Definitely.
And I'm probably gonna, this summer we'll probably see one, and I'll listen to this podcast and look like an idiot. But
sharks don't come close in; they come close in. There's no great whites. Oh, there's great whites.
Yeah, can you imagine cage diving off Lundy Island or something? No, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I did basking shark Scotland a couple of years ago, and we didn't get any basking sharks, unfortunately, which I was gutted about. But we were swimming around a seal colony, and I was just bobbing around. There were seals around me, and there was kelp, and I just was thinking, this could be California, couldn't it? And if something came up and got, there's that human instinct, isn't there? I think when you're in deep water, you can't, even though the rational part of your brain is like, you're absolutely fine, nothing's going to happen, but there is always that kind of primordial part of your brain which is like, there's probably something looking at you down there,
No, I totally agree. Even for me, kind of swimming around the kelp forest in South Africa, even though we knew white sharks haven't been in Cape Town for quite a long time now because of the orcas.
Yeah.
But there's still that part of you thinking, well, what if there is one?
Yeah.
You never know.
I suppose the reassuring thing is there's not a lot you can do.
No, there isn't. There isn't a lot you can do, and there are plenty of people that do free dive with them, and I think you'd be scared, but I don't think it's necessarily the end of the road.
No,
if you see one,
no, I know what you mean.
I've seen loads of footage of them on scuba as well, where people are, just chilling on their safety stop, and then all of a sudden a great white.
It would wake you up, wouldn't it? It would wake you up a little bit.
I would love to do that though. That is high on my bucket list.
What, swim with a great white? You go for it, would you?
For sure.
Really?
Yeah. The kind of the circumstances would have to be right. It had to be the right shark. Which
Okay.
You'd have to observe it in the water first and check that it was behaving as you would expect it to, and the water conditions would have to be right and all of that type of stuff. I've got friends that are experts in that, so I would very much lean on their kind of expertise. But yeah, if I had that opportunity, I would definitely do it.
I think I'd shit myself. From the boat, definitely great whites are up there. They're a bucket list species. I want to see one, but from a boat, I think maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
A lot of people are like, because I volunteered on a cage diving boat for a long time, and a lot of people were not as excited as I thought they would be by great whites.
Oh man, apex predator. You'd have to get pretty excited by that. Do you fish yourself? So you work for the Angling Trust and whatnot?
Yeah, so I grew up with my dad sea angling, so I always have a bit of a dabble. I wouldn't say I go every weekend
No,
without fail.
no.
But if there's a rod around,
Yeah.
I'll have a little go. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, nice. I'd like to fish more than I do. It's just work seems to get in the way, but it's almost like a weird escape. Even though my job is normally revolved about fish anyway, it's just nice to leave the camera at home and take a rod out and have, a couple of hours or something like that. So I do occasionally.
Yeah, I think
you
it's
get
great
to-
fun. You
Yeah.
never know what you're going to get.
No.
It's the patience, the waiting game I'm not so good at.
Yeah, that's the trick, isn't it?
Yeah, but I went out with one of the Loo skippers in September last year, and it was so much more than fishing. We saw a pod of pilot whales. We saw
Oh, wow.
5 to 6 minke whales. Harbour
awesome.
porpoises, sunfish. What else did we see? We saw grey seals on the way back in. Rizzo's dolphins. They're the ones that we
Ah.
saw as well. Bluefin tuna. Honestly, it
Bucket
was
list, I
like
wanna
the
see one of those.
whole ocean was alive,
Yeah.
and it's happening here in the UK.
Yeah. I think people don't realise, like my wife's really keen to go whale watching, and she's like, where can we go? It's like, well, we could do it here. If we choose the right time of year and the right place, there's a pretty good chance, minkies and stuff like that at the very least.
Yeah, Cardigan Bay is a great place
Yeah,
to
is
go.
that right?
Or go up to Scotland, try and get your eyes on the orcas up there.
Yeah, well, I've seen the orcas in Shetland. I'm going to Shetland actually in July for them again.
Okay.
So, but not with my wife, but just to make her jealous. But I would, I would like to get some for her because it would be awesome to see. She wants to see. She has a proper whale, like a minke or a humpback or something like. I know. Although humpbacks are showing more often now, aren't they? They're not. I don't know if you'd call them common, but like they're turning up around the UK a little bit more now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think there's been a handful of sightings particularly around Cornwall.
Yeah.
In the last few years, but fin whales is another species we get
Yeah.
here. Second largest whale on the planet, I think.
Yeah,
it
they are.
is.
Yeah,
and, Ireland is considered one of the hotspots for them.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, I think
Yeah.
Ireland gets them quite regularly. So yeah, I think there's plenty of opportunities to go whale watching here.
Yeah, worth a go, isn't it? For sure. Have you always wanted to work with marine life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say. I think how can you not be inspired? Watching the kind of the ocean documentaries, and I was always glued to the television as a kid, or reading books. Obviously, before social media came out, I had those. I'm still one of those kids. I'm not that young, so I still had all the the textbooks and everything that I would just go through again and again, and I loved aquarium visits. And,
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say that when I was younger, marine biology was still this kind of, I suppose it was like being an actor or an actress or a singer. Like it was something every kid said that they wanted to do, but not many people knew how to actually do it. And
No.
even my own careers advisor was a bit like, I'm not really sure what you can do to get in this field. And I didn't come from a family that had ever, both my parents left school at 16. So we didn't know what to do, so there was like a good couple of years where I thought, what, it's fine, it was a pipe dream, I'll just go into sort of management or accounting or something and be really deeply unhappy for the rest of my life. And then I just I watched a Shark Week documentary, and I saw for the first time ever a woman on it. It's Alison Towner, who's a lady from Manchester, based in South Africa. And I thought, what, if she can do it, so can I. So I booked one of these. I worked countless jobs in like River Island and whatever to save up money. I went to South Africa, and I met this community of women in marine science that are never represented on television, ever, really. And I thought, what, let's give it a go. And that was kind of, the rest was sort of history, so to speak. I just managed to keep networking and studying and kind of finding my feet. But it's something I've always wanted to do, but it's certainly not an easy thing to get into. I think probably more so now. There's more sort of a doggy has joined us.
We've got a Labrador, yeah. I'm just kidding.
I
It's always the trouble with doing these in a park that we've got a. Oh, good. I think he was about to have a crap then, so we've just luckily avoided that.
Yeah, bless him.
Sorry, we're trying. If any. Cats not so much, but dogs. I'm a big fan of dogs.
Yeah,
I do love my dogs. So.
I have a German Shepherd, so I'm a bit...
Oh, really? I used to have a German Shepherd. I've got 2 sausage dogs now, which is a bit of a step down. But I used to love German Shepherd. Yeah, I nearly brought my dogs with me today, but they would moan about being in the cold. They hate it. They don't like it. So I thought it's just easy to leave them at home. But yeah, so you it's one of those things you're mentioning your career, and it is a hard one, isn't it? Like how do you? I suppose you can study to be a marine biologist, but how do you convert that to cash, basically.
Yeah.
It's tricky, isn't it?
It is tricky, and there's this. I don't know if it's so much of a problem now, but when I was studying, there was this push for pay to get experience,
Right.
and I think that hugely.
Oh, what, the person's paying to volunteer?
Yeah,
essentially?
yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, no.
So and that would be like advertised as the way in.
Yeah.
Because you need experience to get a job, right?
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
just
yeah.
enough to have a degree anymore, unfortunately, and even then it's not just enough to have a normal degree. Normally you need a master's now, or a PhD.
Yeah.
So I was desperate to get in the field and under the impression that I needed one of these things. So I worked like 4 or 5 different jobs during my master's degree just to be able to afford to do these programs. And unfortunately, you pay a lot and you don't get much in return. And you think when you do, other than really washing wetsuits, and you think
Pissy wetsuits.
going on a boat every now and then when they don't have paying clients,
Yeah.
and the rest of it's a glorified holiday. And you think that you're getting this scientific training, everything, until you actually go to like a scientific interview and trains joining us.
Yeah, like
absolute in agreement from the train.
Yeah.
And then the kind of interviewer says to you, "I'm really sorry, but you've not got the experience that you think you've paid for." You know? So I really think that actually, if you're going to volunteer, do it at your local wildlife trust, or do it at, Orca Foundation, for example, does a great course in marine mammal surveying, where you can go on the ferries that go between here and Bay of Biscay.
I've heard about that. Yeah, I know people who do that.
I haven't done it myself, but looking back now, I would have got a lot more experience doing something like that, or kind of the British divers, marine life rescue, those types of things. I think a lot better than feeling like you have to go to the other side of the world. I think there's a huge issue with it's a privilege in some ways to be in this field, and it's much like the kind of sustainable choices in many ways are a privilege. So we just need to pull people up with us, I think.
No, I completely feel your pain, because I slightly different, but in terms of people giving their images away for free, and they just think, well, that's the norm. Like, you've got to exposure is the thing. I fucking hate that expression when people are like, you've got to get some exposure. Like, well, you can't eat exposure. It's no good for you.
I think it's true. When I was freelancing as a student, so many people would want me to write for free, and at the time when you're like 20, you're like, okay, fine,
I'll you don't know any better.
You don't know any better, and you're literally like you're like, oh, I really want to write for a living. So you just do it.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, you get a little bit older and you've got bills to pay, and you're like, well, I can't just go here and do this and pay for me to go.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If you want me there, you
Yeah.
need to pay for me,
No,
even
exactly.
if it's just expenses covered.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult, and people always play but you do it because you like the natural world and you want more people, and absolutely I do, but as you say, it doesn't pay the bills.
No, you've got to eat, haven't you, Hannah?
Yeah,
you've got to keep the lights on.
Yeah. I can't do what I do if I don't have food in my belly.
Exactly.
And, a house over my head. So
yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Well, anyway, let's draw it to a close with the book. So it's available now. Mm-hmm. It's as of recording, it's available. When this comes out, it'll also be available. If people want to buy Britain's Living Seas, where's the best place to go?
They can go to the Bloomsbury website direct, or they can go to bookshop.org, I think it is, and
Okay.
it will show you all your local bookshops that you can buy it from. It's also available from places like Waterstones,
Okay.
and other online retailers that I don't want to promote.
Wink, wink, nudge,
Wink,
nudge.
wink,
Yeah,
wink. You know what I'm talking about.
Okay,
So
yeah.
shop local if you can.
Yeah.
That's the best way.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks for sitting with me on a cold bench in Peterborough.
No
It's been
worries.
absolute, because we've been waffling for a few years now, so it's good to actually finally meet you and have a chat. But
Yeah, no, it's been great. So I can't even speak. It's so cold.
your lips are going blue. You can't talk.
Yeah, if my brain is like not computed today, I really apologise to your listeners, and they're listening and they're like, "What is she going on about?" It's because I'm cold, guys.
Should we go get a hot drink or something?
I think so. I think that would be great.
Cheers.
That was Hannah Rudd. She is so enthusiastic about the subject of marine life, and particularly sharks. Like, we had a good waffle after the podcast as well about them. It really shines through, and it's one of the fantastic things I've enjoyed about doing the podcast, is that I'm getting to meet people who you sort of know online, but you don't often get an opportunity to meet in person. So it is nice meeting those people. Now, if you've been intrigued by this conversation and you would like to buy a copy of Hannah's book, Britain's Living Seas, there is a link in the description. But as we said in the podcast, most bookshops should have it also. Now, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, one of the things you can do is leave a review. We're desperate for reviews. So whether it's on iTunes, Amazon, wherever you listen to your podcast, if there is a facility to leave a review, that is greatly appreciated. It helps us in the rankings. So if you can do that, great. You can also follow us on social media at Tit Bearded and at Facebook, The Bearded Tits Podcast. And over on Instagram, it's Fish Twitcher. Next week, we've got an interesting one. I mean, they're always interesting, but this is an interesting one. And we've got Luke Buttle on. Now, he manages 1,000 acres of land in the East Midlands, and as part of that job, he has to control deer numbers. Now, I know this is potentially a divisive topic, but I'm actually going to be going out with Luke while he's trying to shoot deer, really to talk about the complex issues of deer management in the UK, what species we have, why they're a problem, or perceived problem anyway, and talk about all this sort of stuff with shooting deer. So it's going to be an interesting one. I'm not going to shoot the deer, but I've never been around someone who shot a deer before. So it's going to be quite interesting to see the process and also talk a little bit about why it needs to be done. This has been the Bearded Tits Podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Cheers.